Ultimate wealth is found in wisdom alone.
Hello, everyone. Neil, Grant, and George here. We're doing our Guide to Retirement 2024 webinar and discussion, just covering some general statistics around retirement and how that might affect people. Great information here. All of this comes from JP Morgan. So each year, JP Morgan aggregates data around longevity, statistics on savings, spending, etc. It's really helpful for us to know and really helpful for people to know on like how to make a wise, informed decision that's statistically in that best practice or a sweet spot for achieving a goal. And so we're going to kind of jump into that here. So again, big thanks to JP Morgan for putting this together for us. All right, guys, so the retirement equation. There are things that you can control, that you have total control. Some things you have like moderate amount of control of, and then some things you have that in retirement that are just out of your control. And we all know somebody who had a health event, and the retirement they were planning just wasn't what ended up transpiring in their lives. And so we end up trying to control the things that we can control as best we can. We can't control things like market returns. We can't control necessarily tax policy. We can't control every aspect of our health. We might have some control over longevity, but there's certain things that are just out of our control. For the younger people listening to this, savings rate, absolutely in your control. Asset allocation, these are the two big dials. So savings rate, asset allocation. Life expectancy probabilities. Guys, if you think of anything here you think would be helpful to add in, please do. So as I kind of go on and on here, just stop me or add in, a piece of wisdom. So here's the gist of this. If you're married, right, and you're planning, this is for somebody who's already 65, so up to 65, some people have already passed, but you reach 65, you're at retirement, you're still married, what is the probability of one of the two of you living to 95? That's 46%. So this category is here for at least one person in a couple living past 95. We have a lot of people who are planning for 90, 92, but in reality, the chance of one of the two of the people in a spouse at 65 living past 95 is actually quite high. The other big thing that should jump out to us here is that the ladies just tend to outlive us, guys. So we need to be planning for that. All right. Anybody want to take this slide, or should I keep going?
You can keep going.
All right. So managing expectations of ability to work. So most people, when they're planning for retirement, all these slides are related to this. This is the guide to retirement. Many people, expect to and are planning around 65, but in reality, things happen in life that can force you into retirement early. So actual is 62. So what are some of those things? This is the big one. Health problem or disability will keep you from going to work. And so that's really important to know, and it's important to plan for, because we don't always, we aren't always able to work as long as we may want to. So this is also important for the person that, loves working and wants to work the rest of their lives and, isn't going to save a dime potentially because they're just going to work. Well, you don't always get the privilege of being able to work. And when that happens, it's good to have a plan put in place. And for those that do want to work the rest of their life, think of it like, being, financially independent at a particular date, and possibly looking at doing that a little bit earlier, because we may not be able to work as long as we may want to work. There are other things that come up, changes in a company, downsizing. I've seen this happen, a big software change that can really change people's job completely, and something that they never wanted to do or don't like doing any longer. They have to take care of a spouse or a family member. Oftentimes, this is the ladies. Tends to be the case that they're taking care of an older family member or even their spouse sometimes. So there's other reasons that our people are forced into retirement.
Mhm.
For people who do hit retirement, and it is really healthy, especially for guys, to continue to work a little bit. So, prepare for retirement on your own terms. But some people choose to, continue to work. In the purple here, these are people who, wanted to continue to work just to stay active, and they enjoy working. Maybe they had a job opportunity come up that was something that was adjacent to what they did during their main working years, and they wanted to try something new, or they just want to do something else. But there's a lot of good reasons to continue to working. Some people will continue to work because they need to. So they have some needs. Maybe it's financially support other people, keep an insurance or a benefit package going. Maybe they just didn't have as much in investments that they wanted to have. They need to meet, make ends meet, avoid reducing savings or pulling from their nest egg. One interesting stat on this, guys, that I find interesting is that 5 out of 7 people actually don't end up using their retirement account for retirement. I always find that really interesting. And I think a lot of times that's for these people here too that are they love working. They want to work and stay active. Nothing wrong with that at all in retirement. I like to think of that as the dimmer switch retirement, where hey, you're still there, but you're just gonna, go to more mood lighting, maybe,
Yeah, you're just going to turn it down a bit.
you're gonna turn it down a little bit and kind of phase it out, because sometimes a light switch in certain careers can be a bit of a shock to the system. So, prepare and have a plan during that phase of your life.
I heard
Just kind
one
of,
planner talk about how you want to be kind to future you. You don't want to put him into a box.
yeah, have flexibility. That's right. Yep. This is an adjacent slide to the last one on having purpose, using time for others and helping other folks. A lot of stats on this, but just have a plan, know where you're going to spend your time. A couple of years ago, there was a stat that came out on like how far away, from your kids should you be to maximize happiness, whereas like too close was like not as happy, too far was
Goldilocks.
not as happy. There was like a mean
Yeah.
between extreme. I find that interesting. Also, like the number of things to be involved in. Like I think it was like 4.2 or 4.3, like work, possibly volunteering, hobby, etc. These like keeping active basically is having a plan goes beyond just financial, and that leads to health and happiness deep into retirement. Anything else you guys think that we should add here?
One thing that comes to mind is that if you're a business owner, that you can often be used to a type of living standard that is locked up in your business. And that can go back to some of the previous points that Neil was making on trying to think through how to decouple those things and combine your wants and your needs in such a way that excludes the business as part of that planning in the future.
Sure.
So that can be a kind of a trap in that way where you're forced into maintaining the business in order to maintain your lifestyle.
Right. Those are for our business owner clients. It can be a bit of a change going from business owner to non-business owner, and a lot of the equity that that you've invested back into the business isn't realized until that time. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, George. All right, Social Security. This is a big decision for a lot of folks. A lot of our clients, this is a big decision. Like a lot of things, the more that wealth you've generated, your oughts become coulds. You could do this, you could do that if you've got a lot of flexibility with your plan. But for a majority of Americans too, this may be the most important like retirement decision that they make is when do they take Social Security? Generally speaking, wait longer. Just generally speaking, wait a little longer for people that and I say that generally in that, you know, a lot of folks don't have a lot saved at all for retirement, and this is a big decision because when they flip this switch, it's not completely permanent, but it is it adds a lot of structure to somebody's plan. And George, kind of like what you mentioned just prior, having flexibility and planning for flexibility is important. And so let's just go over this real quick. Actually, let's cruise to this slide here. So because this is what people want to know. Taking early versus taking later, you know, when does the crossover point happen between those things? So your benefit when you take it 62 might be here, benefit of taking it 70 may be way up here. But if you start stacking up all those 62, 63, 64, 65, 60, 67, 68, all these payments, like how long does it take for that 70 to catch up? Like where's the crossover point? And so that's what's showing here. So this is at age typically between 77 and 81 for taking early or versus claiming at your full retirement age. So it takes a while to get to that point. I like to say Social Security is sort of like a volume of water. And as you wait another year, say from 67 to 68, you've just taken that volume of water and you've squeezed it a little bit.
Yeah.
So what happened? The volume went up, but the
amount
total
really isn't any
amount
different.
it hasn't really changed that much. It's all based on an actuarial table. So these are where that crossover point takes place. The other reason I like this slide is it puts into context here what we call the opportunity cost. So most of the time in Social Security tools that we have, it'll show you just this 0%. So it's just going to show you these numbers on the bottom. But if you consider, especially if you have more assets, and maybe health is questionable, or you have something else going on, taking early and investing it can make sense for that person. Because they also have that asset too as a real asset to hand off to their kids. And Social Security doesn't necessarily go to the next generation.
Neil, you did mention health in there, and that's something we discuss with people pretty often, is taking it earlier may be a very good idea if your health is in question.
Absolutely. Yeah. The other big decision is, are you going to continue to work, which is back up on these slides here too. Full retirement age, is a little bit deceiving. It should be the earnings test ending age is what that should be called. Maybe they've called it full retirement age for branding purposes or something. So people wait a little longer. But if you're planning on working, you may not want to take Social Security early, even if you could. Why? Because Social Security will pull that money back. Every dollar you earn over, what was it, guys?
$22,000.
$22,320. Yeah. Whatever you earn over that, your Social Security's reduced $1 for every $2 you earn above that. And how it's reduced is they take that money back. It's like a bill. They bill you for the 20 grand that they overpaid you. So nobody likes a bill for 20 grand.
And that bill, just to clarify, is on your taxes. So a lot of people will not be planning ahead for that huge tax bill, and it'll be a really big surprise.
Yeah, they file their taxes. The Social Security Administration gets that. They find out what somebody actually earned in ordinary earned income, and then they send you a bill later on in that following year, kind of a nasty gram if there is one. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. I find this is a really interesting statistic. people can kind of look at this and get a real general estimate on kind of where their income is. Starts at 30,000, goes up to 300,000, and what percentage of their pre-retirement income are they likely to need to replace for their standard of living. So the more you make, the less you may need of your pre-retirement income. A lot of reasons for that, obviously taxes are higher when you have a high earned income. Other reasons may be, I've mentioned this to the guys, that certain expenses like the cost of milk don't go up, if you're in a higher income. So you don't necessarily need as much of your pre-retirement income as you would in retirement. It also shows here, guys, in this green section, this is Social Security benefits. So it shows how little Social Security benefits really make up of a retirement income for a higher earner. So if you're a high earner, Social Security and election strategies don't move the needle as much. But I think at least here in Central Oregon, the average household income is around 60,000. So you can see, when you consider taking Social Security, what percentage of income that's going to make up of that individual's pre-retirement income is pretty large. So that decision becomes a much larger factor into, when to take it, what percentage of income is that going to replace, etc. I'm going to skip this slide. Yeah, these can be, looking at how much you should have saved can be a little bit intimidating.
Bad.
So, everybody starts somewhere. If you're watching this for the first time, just know that you're going to start somewhere and, save. We try to target 15% of income saved. And this is showing household income and then age and then savings rate on where you should be. There's a point, though. I find this crazy, maybe not, it's just not reasonable. If you're 45 and you make 250,000 and you're just getting started, to save 40% of your income is not reasonable. Because if you're making 250, you might be paying close to 30% of that in taxes. You have a mortgage to pay, and this stat saying you need to save 40% of your income. Not reasonable. So start early is the gist. Try to start as early as you can. 15% for most people will achieve their goal of being able to retire. The other thing is, this is factoring in a 60-40 diversified portfolio as opposed to being in more of a growth-oriented portfolio. So if you're younger, you might even need to be saving less to achieve that goal. So all these numbers kind of slide downward if you're invested a little bit more aggressively. All right. I'm gonna skip some of these slides to get some of the good and juicy information for our clients. Obviously, saving early and investing early makes an enormous difference. Everybody knows that, but there's a rule of 72. Now, this is no guarantee of return, but the rule of 72 is this, just for quick math, if you're trying to figure this out in your own head. The stock market typically doubles in value every 7.2 years. So if you start 7.2 years early and you have the same savings rate as somebody who's, let's say, 20 versus 27.2 in age, that person who started at 20 versus 27.2 has a whole another flip of the money that they've accumulated, which at that phase, if it's 2 million, that means it goes 2 to 4, right? Or 4 to 8. And so it becomes a huge differentiator starting as early as possible. So very important. This is auto escalation of your savings. I'll just say this, that there's times in somebody's life where they can save more than other times. Just try to get in a habit of saving, 15% of income and use that as the benchmark. If you're doing that, you got that big item taken care of and checked off, everything else tends to flow all right. All right, so this is just saying that in retirement, you've got diversified income streams from different types of accounts. You may have a taxable account, you may have a Roth 401k or IRA, you may have a health savings account you're taking money from. So it's good to have different sources of retirement income funding. Yep. This is a real common question, guys. We've covered this a few times. What question do we typically get around most common? What would you guys around Roth versus traditional?
A lot of people want to know if they have their option within their plan, which one is better for them, and a lot of it depends on income.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. This in a career cycle, you tend to have this escalation of income. You know, when you're just starting out, it can be difficult to get going, but you know, as you get older, your earnings go up and up and up and up. Now, there's some careers that kind of level off where, you know, the work that you do when you're 25 is almost identical to the work that you're going to do when you're 45. There's some careers, though, that just the responsibility and the work demands continue to rise and your income continues to rise. But generally speaking, almost all income career paths, you know, I would call this a W-2 wage type of career path as well. Tends to go like this, where it goes up and up and up, and then around 45 to 50, you begin to plateau. So this is important for the person wondering, hey, my income has kind of plateaued. I'm making good money now. I'm a little bit behind on my retirement savings. It may make sense to do a pre-tax traditional contribution to 401k rather than Roth, but you may not always hear that advice. Why is that the case? Because when you retire, you're in a lower income bracket, a lower tax bracket, and you can convert the traditional over to Roth at a lower bracket down the road. So that's kind of the gist of that. And it, you know, there are definitely times earlier in your career it makes a lot of sense, ton of sense to just do after tax, get that tax-free growth. Kind of a range of may not matter as much, and then there's a range where it really is beneficial to get that deduction. Maximizing health savings accounts. This is something that a lot of folks don't talk about, but you know, you can save a lot inside a health savings account, and you can actually use it for retirement. This slide here says health savings accounts a triple tax advantage. What are the triple tax advantages?
Going
Deduction.
in. Yep.
Go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Okay, you got it. You got it. Deduction, tax inside the account, a growing tax-free, and then on the withdrawal side, being able to have almost the Roth-like event of having it be after-tax dollars, treated as after-tax dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
certain qualified expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, and that Venn diagram with the circles kind of overlapping. This is one of those few types of accounts that sits in the middle of the three.
Right.
Tax deduction, tax-free growth, tax-free liquidation, you know, for health expenses. If you liquidate for non-health expenses with an HSA, there's actually it's taxable income. And there's some things you can do. You can actually save up health bills, you know, and then have them deduct like down the road as you do your withdrawals, apply those past health expenses to current health HSA withdrawals. So there's some things you can do, still like some loopholes to health savings accounts, but it's one of those like in that order, which I think they have an order here. Here we go. Now everybody's a little bit different on this, so don't take this as personal tax advice, but you know, I've heard this called the order of operations, you know, for what order should people stay within, like obviously emergency funds, super important. This is saying defined contribution plans next. I liked it, that health savings account is just a few places you get a triple tax advantage. I might move that up depending on the person's financial situation. Paying down high interest debt, you know, if you've got a 10+% interest rate on a debt, risk adjusted return on the return that you get for net worth building is high, so pay that off first. I would probably put this number 3 earlier, especially right now, because most consumer debt is higher than what you get in a a typical stock market annual return. But there's an order to these things. Everybody's different on this depending on your tax year. Hey, did you sell a home? Did you not sell a home? Did you come into some money? Did you get a big bonus this January and now it's affected everything else? So everybody's a little bit different on how on what order they should follow here. But it is important to know your tax deductible defined contribution plans, your HSAs. These are good places to focus on. IRAs, and then last they have taxable account for saving. But you definitely want to have a focus on that savings rate that we talked about earlier. All right, this is emergency fund reserve. So this is that number 1 on that order, and in the Dave Ramsey plan, which we're a big fan of, building that savings. This is the number of weeks in income. So weeks. So think of this in terms of 4 weeks, about a month. 8 weeks, 9 weeks, about 2 months. So let's write in here 3 months, maybe right in this range. So this is saying what where workers age 25 to 64 typically have their cash reserves depending on their income, which is kind of interesting to me. Less than 50 have a little higher cash reserves than those that have higher income. One thing that's also not discussed here is that as income goes up as you move up into responsibility, the probability of being let go is actually increased. So it's important to know that and potentially hold a little higher cash reserve. Looking over this slide, it's also interesting that some of these things happen more frequently than people think. Like life is uncertain, spending shocks and or job losses can happen at any time. Emergency fund savings can help pay for these uncertain times and keep retirement savings on track. Workers typically encounter a spending shock more frequently, about once every 3 months. So that's like, hey, I need new tires on my car. Hey, I gotta replace that dishwasher. Hey, I just realized I've got to pay for this sports thing for my kid. All these things, these spending shocks can happen more frequently than people think, saying every 3 months. And an income shock happens about once every year. We recommend 3 to 6 months for all clients, whether or not they're retired or not. Even 6 to 12 in some cases for people who have highly variable income. And you know who you are. If you're watching this, you're a commercial realtor, it can go dry for months and months at a time, even a year at a time before you actually make money. So, save accordingly. This is just saying, where do people typically pull money from, prior to retirement? Don't pull from your retirement account, but people do. They may take a loan. They may put money on credit cards, and they may decrease their savings rate. So these things happen. This is where people take money from. We generally don't recommend plan loans. Why is that? Well, because if you let go, then your plan loan becomes taxable immediately upon last day. So taxable as earned income and the 10% penalty. So you can't plan when that's going to happen. So try not to take plan loans. There are scenarios where it's like the best bridge, but generally speaking, it's another risk to your plan if you take a plan loan. This shows some of the toxic effect of taking plan loans throughout different sections of time in your life, where you've got years where you're repaying a loan, and how that opportunity cost of not having this white section invested during these times, how much of a difference that makes over your over the plan life of the defined contribution 401k 403b plan. All right. More reasons. We're going to skip that. Let's see. Average annual spending by age and category. This should be kind of intuitive for most of us. We're going to cover in more detail here, kind of graphically, how that works out over time in retirement. The big one to know is that as you get older, obviously your healthcare expenses tend to go higher. And this is all averaged, but it can be up to 16% of annual spending as you get older. So healthcare expenses just become much, much larger. You know, gifts to charity also tend to grow, but you may not be traveling as much, maybe spending similar amount, eating a little less out, etc. Housing. This actually, we'll look at that here in a second too, but housing tends to go down a little bit in retirement as people who retire, some people retire with a mortgage and they've eventually paid that off. But on the end of that, end of life, it goes back up again for housing costs. So yeah, let's look here. So this is average annual household spending by age. This is for people with 250,000 to 750,000 of investable assets. So this is a good chunk of our clients that retire with 500,000, 750,000 in retirement assets. So they've retired, say, right in this range. This is surprising to me, guys. Like when you do budgeting for a retiree, more secure you want your retirement plan to be, the more secure you need your budget to be. And so you know what that budget is, you know what your constraint is. You go into retirement with a lot more confidence, knowing where those constraints are. But this tends to be so close to where most people fit that are in this asset level, 250 to 750 in assets, investable assets. This is how spending tends to go. So it tends to actually, drop over time. I call these your go-go retirement years. Anybody want to beat me to it? What's the next one?
No go.
Slow go and no go. That's right. Yeah. And healthcare, you can see healthcare goes up and housing expense also goes up. Okay, 1 to 3 million in assets. So this is also a good chunk of our clients. Tend to spend a little bit more. But similar, the last slide started here. This one starts a little bit earlier, but you see spending does tend to slide a little bit over time in retirement. Same thing, healthcare goes up and housing goes up over time. Most of our plans that we run for clients are linear, meaning if we set it at 122 at age 60, it's going to index for inflation, stay linear. But in reality, spending does tend to go down over time in retirement.
Which is a good buffer.
Yeah. 4% rule, those who aren't familiar with that, that's a 4% withdrawal rate. Historically, that's been pretty sustainable for most market cycles. I also want to show this though. So this is
like the title.
Yeah, dollar cost ravaging. Yeah. Timing risk of withdrawals. Yeah. So, if you make it, just assume an 8.1% return, you might say, oh, I'm fine. That's like that. But our program uses Monte Carlo analysis, variable returns. And so it's important to have that kind of variable return. We call it sequence of returns risk. And it's really good to have a plan for that main reason. This is the slide I want to cover though. This is important. And there's been more and more research done on this particular section. And there's a really good report that if anybody's watching this and wants to get it from us, from Morningstar, on just various ways to take retirement income and consider taking a withdrawal with dynamic adjustments based on performance. What does that mean? You can see here that's pretty similar for the first 5-7 years of retirement. But then there's a dip, a slide for maybe 2 years in the market. And then it took a little while to come back out of that in retirement. So if you take less during these down years, you recover quicker. So it's because it has a compounding effect. And so in those years, if you take less you can potentially spend more for a lot longer down the road. I mean, it's kind of like saving, you know, it's similar concept that if you don't take during big down years or take less,
Then there's
yeah.
more money to grow on the upswing.
More or less, yeah. And then you have the potential on a big up year to increase your spending as well. So I'm a big fan of this. Consider taking a dynamic, you know, adjusted based on performance, a withdrawal strategy based on that, you know, performance of the account. Yep. All right. Medicare, I'm not going to go into a lot of details on this. We may have another webinar slash client appreciation event where we have somebody come in and talk about some of the changes that are coming up in Medicare. But this is important for people who are getting close to 65, making those decisions. Rising healthcare costs, we all know this intuitively. You know, and the inflation on healthcare is a little higher than other areas. So consider that. That's also why that health expense tends to be something that eats into a larger percentage of a retiree's budget over time. Yeah. All right. Long-term care. This is probably one of the biggest risks to somebody's financial plan in retirement. And what is long-term care? People think, what do you guys think of when you think of long-term care?
Nursing homes.
Yeah. Grant, you same?
In-home care.
Okay. Yeah, so that is actually more, the cycle tends to be, because it's not just nursing home. I think that's the way I initially would have thought about it too. Hey, there's nursing homes, hospice, probably long-term care. Well, that is true. Those are included, but in reality, it expands the full breadth of a care cycle, which would include, you know, home care. That might just be having somebody come in at the beginning of the week, check on you, make sure that the meds are set up right, and you know, there's like they're going to come in and just check. Okay, that's long-term care. Long-term care, though, policies that pay for long-term care typically have two, I believe it's 2 of the 5 of activities of daily living, which are like feeding, toileting, transferring. There's a number of them. And if you can't do 2 of the 5, then you typically can claim on your long-term care policy. So that would be, you know, having an official long-term care event. Memory, that's usually only one. If somebody has Alzheimer's, that's a one, you know, only takes that one event, and then you can claim on a long-term care policy. But this shows here the duration of paid care, 65 plus, you know, if paid care is used. So it shows the percentage of these events for women and for men, and how long on average they go. So one thing stat that should come before this would be, it's about 50-50. So, you know, between George, between you and I, one of us is going to have a long-term care event. Like, it's 50-50. So that stat should come first. What's next? How long is that long-term care event going to last? So on average, it's about 3 years. You know, women tend to be in that scenario a little longer than men because they tend to outlive us a little longer. So some things to consider when you're planning for long-term care. So lifetime cost of care, 65 plus, if care is used, you can see that 30% go above 250,000. So this is why this can become a really big, you know, drain on savings. If you do have a long-term care event, again, it's the whole spectrum of home care, and you may have home care for months to years, and it usually is like maybe once a month. Excuse me, once a week, twice a week, 3, and then it's up to 7 times a week. You have somebody coming in and doing care. To acute care, which is where you have a skilled, you know, nursing, typically a nursing home. It could be an assisted living place where they have a nurse that's doing It needs professional level care for somebody. So it's the whole cycle of care, all the way down to to hospice. So this is the average cost for women and for men. Big, something to consider for those that are getting into retirement. Is this long-term care planning can be a big issue. A couple things you could do: build up more assets. You could insure it. Have a plan for it. Know what you're going to do before you actually have to make this decision. Yeah, so here you go. Planning options, family and friends. Would somebody come and help take care of you? We looked at that earlier. Sometimes that happens where you have to take care of a parent. Savings, reduce expenses, cut back lifestyle significantly. You can insure it away. There's certain life insurance plans that provide an early death benefit for long-term care coverage. It's probably one of the more common ones now to look at. Using home equity or selling a home. One thing that can trap people here is reverse mortgages. So if you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, I'm just going to take a reverse mortgage, consider this: you have to live there. So, if you do need acute care, you are stuck kind of in your house, living there, because if you move out of it, then that reverse mortgage no longer becomes viable, and so you potentially have to sell the house in that scenario. So be careful with those. Long-term care can catch up to you in that regard too. All right, yeah. So same things: how to fund retirement goals, increasing wealth, spending systematically. This is just intuitive. Typical life cycle, guys, of like financial planning. You have your accumulation cycle, you have your accumulation preservation, and then preservation distribution, and then all of us at some point will distribute all of our wealth to somebody that comes after us. So all these things are things to think about as you're planning for retirement, and which withdrawal strategy makes the most sense. One of the best things to inherit is a Roth IRA account, right? Because it goes to your heirs without them having to pay income taxes on, as opposed to inherited IRAs or other types of accounts. So all these things kind of factor in on like what would be make the most sense for me. All right. This just gets into asset allocation for our younger investors. Savings rate. Don't think that choosing good investments makes a big difference. It does. But statistically, savings rate's more important. But, if the more aggressive you are with your investments, this showing a more equity focused portfolio here. This shows the 20-year average return, so 6% to 17% average. 10-year rolling, there has been times where the market's been down on a 10-year cycle, not many, but it can be the case. So -1 to +19. As you go out here further, getting these higher average returns tends to be in your equity focused funds. So if you're younger, you want to be more aggressive. Older, you shouldn't stomach this volatility. You can't afford to be down, significantly. So something to consider. This is just the impact of being out of the market at the wrong time, missing the 10 best days versus being fully invested makes a big difference. And you don't know when those big days are going to come. They can happen midday too. Fed makes a decision that impacts the market midday, or a report comes in that wasn't expected. So trying to time the market is difficult, if not impossible to do. We don't time the market, so not going to be our job to do that, because it's so risky for a financial plan to miss those days, those big up days. Secure 2.0, we have a whole nother webinar on this. This affects the way people can inherit, distribute, when RMDs come due, all that. I'm not going to cover that here. Anything else, guys, that I miss from this or that we should go into more depth on?
Reading a book on Guide to Retirement by Wade Powell, and one of the things that's important to remember is that there's a lot of different styles, and something we emphasize here, styles to doing retirement. And one of the things we emphasize here is knowing who you are and having accountability with that kind of realization of your identity is going to be key to which strategies you choose. And so part of our value is being able to talk with you and hold you accountable, but also clarify your sense of self as you're thinking through what to withdraw and when to withdraw it and what you want to actually prioritize.
Yeah. Yep. Like we say here, there are no imperatives or what somebody ought to do without the right indicatives. So you have to know kind of who you are, what you're all about to get the right imperatives to come from that. I think another way to think about that too, George, maybe this is, tell me what you think about this, but kind of knowing where our constraints are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you get to retirement, what are the constraints that I'm going to be living within? You know, the more saving you've done, the more broad your constraints might be, but there's still a constraint, and kind of knowing where those are can be really helpful towards living well in retirement. Yeah. Grant, any thoughts?
Just delving back a little bit into taking Social Security while you're still working prior to 67. Just, you kind of alluded to the fact that, it's kind of like a volume of water, the amount of money that you're going to get in Social Security, and you can either compress it or stretch it out. And the one thing I just want to point out to folks is that tax bill that you can get back, the point here is that if you don't need it yet, don't take it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to end up with that tax bill. You're still going to end up relatively with the same amount of money available to you, but just less time to claim it, essentially.
Yeah. It is a little individualistic on how somebody should, not only on asset level and level of risk they're willing to take, but also how their health is, if they could potentially go back to work, or they really don't ever want to touch their work again. They do the light switch, not a dimmer switch type of retirement. So all those factors play into how to elect to take Social Security. But generally speaking, you wait a little longer, your benefit goes up by 8% a year. Again, it's kind of like a volume of water. It gets squeezed over one less year, that volume goes up, or the dollar goes up, total volume doesn't change much. So some things to be thinking about when taking Social Security. Yeah, but that's a big one other question I always get is if Social Security even exists, right? That's what people say. And I think most Social Security statements, it says like Social Security will run out of money at X, Y, or Z date.
Yeah.
Okay, so here are some of the levers that will be pulled. Right now, that earnings test is only based off of ordinary income, W-2 income, or earned income that you make. They're not including retirement withdrawal income. They're not including dividend income, interest income. They're not including passive income from investments, K1 type of income, long-term capital gains, all these different types of income. They're not including right now for the earnings test. And even if they included a couple of them, like say for instance, rental property income or dividend income into the earnings test, just right there, it's going to extend the life of Social Security out further. The other thing they could do is right now, full Social Security age, which is again that earnings test limit age, which is about 67 for most of us. They could just move that 67, 68, 69, 70. Why not? If they move that out, it's going to extend the life of Social Security as fewer people take it earlier in their lives. And the sad reality right now in the United States is our longevity is slowly decreasing. So what am I saying there? That if they do that and our longevity decreases, it will help to fund Social Security further. into the future. So there's a lot of levers to make Social Security continue, and there's just too many people that rely on it. So it's likely to be around, unless nuclear war or something like that just totally shuts everything down. So it's likely to be around, and there's a lot of levers to pull to make it extend further. So
Good reasons to focus on what you can control rather than these huge things that are out of our control.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, with that, any other thoughts, guys?
Not for me.
All right, well, with that, we'll wrap this up for 2024. That's our retirement plan overview, statistics, and data. Thanks, everyone.